does that work? Because I get a something went wrong thing.
I saw a countdown, Roland, and it's recording.
Well, that's something. That's something. Good first start. Crossing my fingers. All right, then let's get started. You're listening to What's Your Baseline, the show where we unpack the real world of enterprise architecture, process management, and everything that helps you build a smarter organization. We talk tools, techniques, and tough lessons learned, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. My name is Roland Wold. Grab a coffee. Let's go into it. Hey, Russell, how you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. Happy New Year, Roland. How are you doing?
Yeah. Oh, Happy New Year as well, even though this episode will air in February. So we're a little bit behind the times, ahead of the times, whatever. Thanks for asking. I'm doing good. So 2026 has not thrown any wrenches into my knees or anything else so far. So I'm crossing my fingers that it stays that way. How are you doing? And by the way, how do we get the honor to having you on the show today, Russell? This is so exciting.
So maybe any audience that normally listens to What's Your Baseline, I'm not the clone of Roland. And I'm obviously not JM. That's very obvious.
Oh, you barely see it. You barely see it.
Yeah, that's true. The JM is the man with the hair. That's true. No, so as I understand, JM needs a bit of a backup, and I was really stoked, especially as I heard that you have some awesome guests on the show, and I thought, wow, that would be great if I could, and it's an honor as well, of course, to be able to support you in your podcast and act as a co-host to the best of my abilities.
Yeah, which is awesome. So I'm really looking forward to our recording, because today I think you and our nerd dreams become true, because we have a super interesting topic today, at least I think, which is data modeling, which is data analysis, data science. And I'm so super happy to announce that we were able to could convince Rosaria joining us. And when she opens her mouth, you know exactly what she did over the last, decade and a half, because she was the voice for an open source tool called KNIME. And I'm pretty sure you've heard about that. So Rosaria, welcome to our little show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours for this. And I know that Russell, who's an even bigger nerd than I am, is super excited for this recording. So, but maybe before we get into the topic of data analysis, data science, and how KNIME fits into that big picture, or open source data analysis works, can you give our listeners, the three of them who don't know who you are, maybe a little bit of a background about you? What have you done in the past, and what were your key experience, and where do you live? All these type of things. And most importantly, what are your bucket list items, going forward?
Oh, yeah, that's a hard question. So anyway, let's start from the past. That's easy because it's already happened. So I've been working in data analytics, data science, big data, for a very, very long time. So I started, when I tell people, they are always very surprised. So I'm going to say it again. I started in 1990 when I took my thesis during my master, and I did that on the automatic classification of biomedical signals with neural networks. So at that time was huge.
A mouthful. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That time was huge. And then after I graduated, I stayed for a while in neural networks, and then there was the whole data science history is a bit of up and down. They talk about the winters of data science. And so, when data science was appreciated, then I was a data scientist. When data science was not appreciated, then I became a normal programmer. And I did that for many years. So I went through all the phases. So the neural networks first, then there was a period of quietness. Then I worked, around the year 2000, beginning of the year 2000, I worked at Nuance Communications, and we were working on the first commercial speech recognition engines. So at that time, and then after that, I continued. I worked in data analysis for credit card issue companies. I did some free consulting. I did programming. And then lately, the last job that I had was with KNIME, and I was the VP of Data Science Evangelism, which means it's a fancy title to say that I was doing education. So I started with doing the courses there. So, you have to teach how the tool works, but also since it's a tool that works with data, you have to teach how to deal with data. So how to clean it, how to import data, how to apply machine learning algorithms, the statistics, so all these kind of things. And that's the kind of courses I was doing. And then slowly this one grew into becoming a community kind of work. And then, we were writing the article, and in the article, we were teaching how to do something. Then you were doing a little presentation about similar topic, and then people would come to you, and then at the end you had this big community that they were basically producing things for other people to consume or teaching to each other. So I became somehow the coordinator of this big community, and that was almost 13 years of working at KNIME. I stopped working there last August. Since then, I started a bunch of new projects, but definitely I didn't stop with the community. Now there is a small community that I'm working on Substack. It's called mydatagest.substack.com. And basically there we do everything related to AI.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And by the way, maybe just to do the bridge to our audience, which are typically people working in architecture and in process groups, for obvious reasons, with the advent of process mining, data becomes a real issue. So I was, when you think about in the past, a lot of business analysts, they were just talking with people. They invite the SMEs, they have the big butcher block papers, and then they start talking about, oh, how can we improve it? And I was at a conference like 2 years ago, and I saw all those books about data science and data analysis and all that stuff, which I found refreshing, right? To get people interested in a topic that's, I guess, more objective. But before we get to this and start nerding out, you didn't answer the most important question, Rosaria. What are your bucket list items?
That's complicated. I've started a bunch of projects. So I don't know. I think that what I want to do for the future is definitely to keep working with people. I am a tech person, but and maybe it's rare, but I like people. So I like to be working with people. I like to have, to teach. I think at the end I'm a teacher at heart, probably. So definitely I will do more things with the community. That's the thing that I like the most. Another thing that I would like to do is to do coaching for young entrepreneur, almost students, but let's say that they are not students anymore. Now with AI, they put together a prototype, like, I don't know, in 2 days, in a weekend. And then they say, what do I do now next with this prototype? I mean, what's the difference between a prototype and a product? Is the product enough to start a company? If I want to start a company, do I need a team? So these kind of things. And I don't know, somehow I happen to have a few of these young entrepreneurs. So that's another thing that I would like to do, definitely. It's part of the community, but a bit somehow focused on young adventure. It's fun because it's, they're enthusiastic. It's fun. It's something that I really, really enjoy. And I think I have a bit of experience on some. So sometimes they ask questions. I guess they are just common sense, but maybe it's common sense for me because I've been working in this field for a long time, and maybe it's not for them. So
and it's new for everyone. At some point everything is just new. Like, what am I supposed to do here? Yeah, but maybe we get into the meat of the conversation, and let's get started. And I throw a softball question first, to warm you up before the hard investigative questions come.
I've got the hard ball here.
Yeah. See, that's why he's saving all his energy. Talk to me a little bit about analytics tools in general. What do you see as the landscape? How do you see how this has evolved? obviously a tool like KNIME, open source, everybody can have it. It is obviously I hate to say it, game-changing move, I guess. I'm a big open source fan, but what is your perspective on the analytics evolvement or evolution and the tool evolution that might come with it?
Oh, so the analytics evolution, there have been many steps. The first big step was the big data. That was, I don't know, between 2000 and 2010. And, so the problem when we were working with the neural networks many years ago, it was the hardware, because we would have these fantastic neural networks. They were big. But then, I had a computer. It was a 8386 processor. I don't know, like 25 megabytes memory. And, it took 1 week to train a tiny, tiny neural network. So we were at the bottleneck was the hardware. And when in 2000, the GPU started coming out and, the data also started, it becoming much more available. It was much easier to collect data. There was the whole web, the whole social media that was starting at that time. So then suddenly you started to have a lot of data. You started to have much better hardware. And so I think that was the first big step. Something that was absolutely not possible before. Somehow it became maybe expensive, but for sure possible. Then there was the cloud, it became much easier. And that's when the recommendation engine started, because I think it was the year 2000 when Netflix had this competition that, you were supposed to create a recommendation engine better than what they had. And I think it was $1 million, the award. So the recommendation engines were the big thing, because the e-commerce was starting at that time. So that was the big thing at that, around at that time. And then after that, the deep learning arrived. And I think that was exactly a consequence of the better hardware of the GPU that became better and better. And then with the deep learning, there were things that we couldn't do in the 90s. Like, for example, the long short-term memories, I think are from the 1997. But theoretically, they're from the 1997. You couldn't run them on a laptop. That was not possible, right? So, and then with the deep learning and the better hardware, that was the second big step. And now, of course, after this, the whole deep learning, now we are in the age of AI. The age of AI, in my opinion, has changed a bit the perspective of how we use data analytics. Because before you were doing your model, then you would train your model, test your model, deploy your model, deploy your model, and then you would consume your model. Now with the AI, you just consume it. So we are in the age of consuming rather than creating, and somebody else creates the model. So that's it has a bit changed the perspective. You can fine tune it. You can have a little bit of data, and then you can use this data to fine tune whatever somebody else has already created. You can improve it with a RAG procedure. You can do a bunch of things, but you are not training the model from the beginning. Also because the data is so big now, and the machines that you need to do that is not in the capacity of just a normal laptop on your kitchen table. So this is not possible. So yeah, that's the evolution a bit of the techniques. In the 90s, we were developing everything ourselves. So we were programmers. There was no Python, or Python was very linear. No, I didn't use Python. There was R for the statistics. Otherwise, we were using C++, C or Java for, to develop your own algorithm. So for the tools, I would say they started around the year, early 2000, maybe 2010. And that's, of course, also when Python became extremely popular, because all these libraries that came out made Python extremely powerful. And then there were many different philosophies. So I'm not saying that one philosophy is better than the other. I don't want to say that. But some tools were open source, some tools were absolutely proprietary source. I'm not going to say which one. Some tools were dedicated mainly so they had a big database at the center of their business, but then they had just like a little appendix for techniques. And some tools were focusing on the techniques, and that they had the little appendix, maybe with a little storage for the data. So yeah, there were different possibilities. I don't know. It used to. People used to ask me, how do I choose a tool? How do I buy a proprietary tool? And I said, of course, it depends on what you want to do and what you care about. I used to say, well, the tool that you want to adopt, it has to cover all the techniques that you need. So if you work in finance, for example, it has to have a bunch of ETL, because in finance you do a bunch of ETL. But if you work, for example, I don't know, in a research lab or so where some machine learning is needed, then you need machine learning algorithms. So this is something you need to check when you buy a tool. Then you need to check if it's easy to use, because Python is nice and everything, but you need to be a bit of a programmer. It's not complicated, but you need to be a bit of a programmer, and that's not for everybody. If you're a physician, you already do the physician work. I mean, you don't want to start programming as well, right? So, you need to adopt a tool that you are comfortable using. At the end, you have to use it.
Yeah, that's why I found KNIME. Because I'm in that boat. I was working with a company that had a process mining tool, and still has. But they said, no, the whole ETL transformation thing, Mr. Client, that's yours. We tell you what we expect, a table in this format, to be a little bit oversimplified. How you get there, well, guess what? Your thing.
Figure it out. No, exactly.
We do Jupyter notebooks, and Python and all that stuff. So you can do that. And I was thinking like, wait a sec, that's not me. So what is the way to do this for the rest of us? And some of the tools, if they either like that vendor has nothing, or the majority of them have some SQL-ish language in there, and then you have to learn that, and it's not visual. And I looked at it and said, I don't like that either. And then I stumbled over the KNIMEs, the Alteryxes, and the whatever. There's a couple of those tools, and at the end I got stuck on KNIME, and I loved it.
And I think one of the intriguing parts for me about that is that you can start simple with predefined blocks, and you can focus on the logics of whatever processing you want to do. Yeah, so you could do your step-by-step transformations, and to a big extent, it documents itself because you have this block approach. And there's a lot of tools that do the low code approach, but they're limited because at some time you have exhausted the set of nodes or the blocks that you have there. As you said, Rosario, it's stuck to a certain database, or it's stuck to there's something where it's locked in. So you have fast results, but as soon as you have that level of maturity, they said, this block I would need to adjust, or I would need an own, let's say, node, or sometimes it's a very simple, I would say, even Python function. And you're going, am I going to switch everything to code now just because this one block is missing? Or do I do an interface and do the function outside and bring it back in again? And that's where I think it was a very good approach to have like the low code block approach, which covers 89% of the cases, especially as you have a community continuously contributing here. But you also have the possibility of compiling nodes to your own subset, or even sitting down and writing your own scripts to provide your specific functions. And that's what I think a lot of tools can learn from. The two aspects is that you could start simple, and it explain itself in what you see, which sometimes Jupyter notebooks, you can also have like the commenting functions and you can take your code and build it up as blocks, but it has its limitations, but also the possibility to adapt and go in deep. And that's something that a lot of tools, I think, should, just from a philosophy, should adopt more to be able to cover this journey of maturity that you have when you evolved in a certain technique and technology. And the other thing I must say, the open source, having others contribute, so not as a provider of software to say we know it all. We know which capabilities you need. We define how they look, but you invite an you create an ecosystem of people that are, as you yourself, okay, you were working for KNIME, but you know, the experience over all these years, there's other people that do more financial data analytics, and you see in KNIME, they do biotechnology and research data, clinical trial data. Each have their own view on data, if it's big or small, or if it's more, you know, very in-depth from the algorithms, and setting up an environment that they can contribute, and that the whole platform, let's say, grows with that. That is also something a lot of tool sets can learn a lot from, I believe.
I remember I used to work with banks. And in banks, you have the data scientists who's trained in Python and everything, but you have also the people who are not trained as programmers. And then, you know, then what do? You have them depending on the Python programmer all the time. That's, of course, I mean, limiting for them. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they need an approachable and easy to use solution. So, yeah, why don't empower them to do their own analysis?
Yeah, besides the fact that I loved it, and with that vendor that I work with, we actually built 5 KNIME nodes to make it possible to create that table in KNIME and then shoot it over into the process mining tool, which I loved. Hashtag nerd alert. But maybe to come back to this, were you involved or have you been part of, and obviously you did community stuff and advocacy about it, but why do you think open source is a good way of providing tools, you know, and especially in the data area?
Yeah, these become so I think in general, so without the open source, the community is important, because with the community, basically the community is the heart behind the product. You have a product, it works, you use it, okay, nice, you pay, fantastic. But if there is a community, then you have a bunch of extra resources that you wouldn't have otherwise. You have a bunch of teachers that you wouldn't have otherwise. You have a bunch of challenges. It's a completely different way of working. It's a different philosophy. You need the community or not. I don't know if you like it or not, but in my opinion, it's a huge help. Because I mean, your notes, so if you make, I don't know if you make them public, but I mean, somebody else can use them, and why not? I mean, and then I, as a novice, I use your notes. I don't need to program them. It works. So it's a huge help.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I'm currently working on a product in the context of process simulation. You know, what do you get from a simulation tool, and how do you make it accessible for the mere mortal? Right, so not just a table with columns and rows and numbers in it that are out of context. And I'm using KNIME for it. And maybe it's just me, but Russell, maybe you had the same experience. Working with time is always a little bit tricky, you know. And I had a ton of questions, and I love the KNIME community. You know, I asked a question, and I did this 3 times. Within 3-4 hours, I got an answer. You know, and it was friendly, and it was not like talking down to me. It was like, no, did you check this? And all those. So I love it. I think that's very beneficial.
I think that was one of the things I enjoyed the most when I was working at KNIME. One of the last projects that I did, basically I involved a bunch of experts like university professors and we created extensions. So we set up a little group, and we would create like 10, 15 extensions to expand with the knowledge of the community, the coverage of the functionality that KNIME could offer. And I think it was fantastic because being open source, it's not only that it's free. Okay, free is nice, but it's not only that it's free. It's also that it allows you to be at the edge of the technology because you can use the wisdom that it's coming from university, from research labs, and you don't have to develop everything inside, so in the lab. And that's, of course, you can only develop as much. I mean, you are not constantly as smart as the best of the world. So that's
and I would assume KNIME, the organization, is doing just fine, with that approach. So I don't worry about that. I think it's not mutually exclusive having commercial success with an open source approach.
When people were asking me, so how do I choose a tool for data analytics? So then I would say, the coverage, the ease of use, and I would say check if they have a community. Because if they have a community, your job will be much easier. Check that is a community that is vital. I mean, not a fake community. Because, the more activities, the easier your job will be because you will receive support. You will receive things that, help that would have to provide to yourself otherwise. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. And ultimately, I mean, the ecosystem of community in KNIME is a lot of people that don't do it just, I wouldn't say for hobby, but they're happy to contribute without having any direct economical or commercial kind of like benefit in mind.
Community.
So which makes it really great. But I think for other tools, it's also even beneficial if there is like an ecosystem of consulting companies using the tool. And here, say on ERP level or on process management topics, even there, I think providers that manage a larger ecosystem of consulting companies, even if they are more commercially driven, to build up a community, it's still more beneficial than having like the one-stop shop. You buy the software from this company and all the consulting comes from that company. It's at some time it'll be limiting and you will be in a dependency that you don't necessarily want. So that's where I think the full open source model as KNIME have it, with this like middle part, a software provider that has a good ecosystem, shows, I think, also a level of maturity, understanding what their core competence is on developing software, providing a platform for others to then develop their ideas on. And that's where I think a lot of some platform companies, software platform companies, they are too commercially driven. They're trying to lock it in to maximize their profit short term. And on long term, it's not for the benefit of the customer. Definitely not. And that's where I would also, there's something with AI. It's interesting to see, and I think it's really nicely the way you put it, that this actually the hard part of using data, so the training of models, even thinking of the models and building them up, that is actually already been pre-processed in one big world model, and now people can just consume it. But they can build up, say, multi-staged, let's say, analytics based on the results, and you have different forms of consuming the large language models or whatever models are there. But I think that's really interesting. But on the other hand, there is still this openness. So I think OpenAI has also gone about providing in a very broad base. You have a free tier, you have like the pro tier, and there is already a bigger community. They're actually exchanging their experience on how to use and consume these models. So I think it's not unclever the way. So I have the impression that with big data, a lot of platforms were closed jobs. So as you said, there was a database with a bit of a low-code tool for doing, I don't know if in Silver Lake or in some other tools. So they built platforms that were commercially available, and they were very closed. With AI, I said KNIME is to a certain extent for me an exception. With AI, all of a sudden there's a lot of openness in the market. Yeah, so there's a lot of free tier access to the models. There's a big I wouldn't say community, but the society. Everybody's talking about and exchanging. Have you heard of this prompt? I use it for creating recipes based on a picture of my fridge. Whatever crazy stuff they come up with. But there was a time before AI where I had the impression a lot around big data, it was a closed job. There were little open source tools. It was very highly expensive, highly commercial, highly locked in systems that were being built up. And that's what I'm enthusiastic about, the openness with which a broader mass of people can actually dig into these tools and models and start and really building up real usable systems. Roland.
I'm not sure, Russell, if I follow your logic here, because in my mind, the AI providers, it's whatever, 7 big companies. They're not open source at all. They give you a free tier. Yeah, that's great. Play with it. But at the end of the day, they're commercial entities.
For the AI, I think we need to wait a bit. At the moment, it's true. They are all very commercial. There is a freemium kind of philosophy for some of them. Some of them are free, though. So Hugging Face is free. Let's wait. And they have now this philosophy that it's not open source, it's open model. So you can download the model. Let's see how it evolves. But yeah, there is definitely a big commercial drive there.
Yeah, well, it needs to.
Well, they have big costs. They have big costs.
Trillions of data centers, which I'm holding my breath, and I hope my 401k doesn't go boo-boo somewhere. So let's see.
But no, you're right. It's not the same, but there is a certain openness there, and there's a certain buzziness around the community having access to the open models, and you can have Llama locally installed, and there are some approaches there, and you can, to a certain extent, you can look under the hood more than with these very commercial big data tools that you were being offered.
Yeah, with that, I would love to, because we're talking for over half an hour now, I would love to give our audience a little break where we play a little bit of music and let it sink in. But we're going to continue with that topic after our little break. So, dear audience, for the next, 20, 30 seconds, exhale, I'm curious what your experience in your organization are, about how you approach data analysis in your organization. Do you do that? Question mark. How do you do it? How does it fit into your architecture and process work? And when we come back, we're going to continue a little chat about AI, but maybe more importantly for me, we're going to talk about community and all that stuff around it, because I think that's what is the characteristics. So we're going to see you on the other side.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the music and had time to contemplate on how you in your company have been using data and data analytics. In the meantime, we've had a bit of a discussion around this topic, and that takes me back to the beginning of this session, where Rosario was actually explaining how she was training neural nets, and it took a week to train them.
A tiny one.
Just a tiny one. and now we have a situation where we would say it's not open source, but it's open model. So a lot of these hardware capabilities have now opened up big possibilities, and a lot of these trained models, LLMs, are being provided openly to communities, and people are now using them either as an own personal psychiatrist down to doing real data analytics. But just to phrase a question to you, Rosario, in how far are people going back and taking up because the technology and neural nets and machine learning, all your over all your career, that has always been a topic: machine learning and neural nets and other like models and training them. And in the background, the hardware has been getting better and better. And all of a sudden, there is now this big commercial entities there providing these models. But in how far, in your experience, specifically in like an open source environment like KNIME, has there been a revival of the small models? Yeah, so are people going back and actually learning not just to use models, but also to say, wait a minute, let's start going back to the basics of just doing some own machine learning on certain topics. Has that taken up as well? Or is it being neglected because everybody's saying, oh, let's jump onto the LLM, they've already created the model, we just need to consume it? Or is there also something happening in the background we don't see, where people are starting taking up and using the technology and the hardware, training their own models and deploying them in very specific cases? What is the actual situation there?
I mean, I don't know about the rest, so the whole world. What I see, definitely, the traditional machine learning models, they are still being used, but somehow they are much less popular at the moment. So they're used for small problems, if you have private data, so these kind of things. But it's a bit of a niche now, at least what I see. What I see that people do now, they either they train their own neural networks, because it's actually, I mean, if you have the possibility, it's not that complicated. And as Roland was saying, a lot of people are going into the direction of the small language model. So same principle, same stuff, just smaller dimensions. And then it's something that you might be able to do. Maybe, I mean, you can assemble. Another thing that I see a lot of people do is to use the large language models and then just produce a fine tuning. You have your dedicated data set, and then you just customize whatever the large language model does with your data set. It's like as if the large language model teaches the model, so is the model that has learned to speak, but then you tell him the information about the specific domain, something like that. So this is what a lot of people do. In general, the way we work has changed. So now, instead of building your own models, a lot of us, we ask directly to the AI, or we involve the AI in generic questions. Then if you have, I don't know, you're a bank, you need to do the scoring model. This one is still done, but somehow the investment a lot for the new techniques, for the new technologies on the AI. So you take large language models, you fine tune it, and then you use it for the bank knowledge, for example. So that's where a lot of the stress is going now. Maybe it's also the hype at the moment, so it's going to disappear maybe, and then the traditional machine learning is also going to come back. For sure, the neural networks is also going to come back. But at the moment, a lot of our work has become consuming models of other people.
Looking at, say, that evolution as well, the topic around data models themselves and the databases. So what I see as well is that, say, we work a lot with graph databases, because the models that we build up of the entity organizations are much more complex and dynamic than you would typically want to put into a classical table, like a SQL database. And now with, say, the large language models, there's a lot of talk about vector databases, and there was MongoDB for like unstructured data sets. So along the actual development, say, looking back from the early times of when you were engaged with machine learning down to now, how is these data base types, how have they developed, and how far have they also been? I mean, Neo4j is an open source database I use, and how far has that also been? I think the old Oracle databases, they've been very commercially driven. And is there been a similar openness and open source development around the databases in the context of the development of machine learning and now AI? And in how far do you see data modeling also taken a certain journey where there's some paradigm change based on AI? So where before you just had tables and everything was indexed, and now we have a complete more open thinking about data models. What is your take on that?
So by definition, so the large language models, those are language models. So they rely on unstructured data. So if you have a tabular data, it used to be that they don't work that well, but now, of course, they are using. So now what they do, the large language models, they take your request, and if it's a model to generate on tabular data, they generate a Python script in the background, they run it, and then they get the results. So it's not their focus, the tabular data, but somehow they go around that by developing the Python script for that. So this is, of course, the part where they are the weakest because they were created to be language models. So if you give them tabular data, they are not going to be as reliable as they do, for example, in creating language. But I think they're going to get there because they're really investing a lot on making them able to deal also with tabular data. About the databases, a lot of database companies now, even there, I don't know if I'm up to date, but a lot of database companies, they are providing their own AI. So I don't know now, I don't know all of them, but some of them are dealing also with tabular data. I don't know, it's a bit of a new area, but I think, I remember when ChatGPT came out and it was giving all these weird answer. You remember, right, that the text was strange and the English. And I remember that I was saying, well, but it's a huge step, and give it 2 years and it's going to provide fluent English. And that's what it is. And I think we are at the same time in a point in time now about the tabular data. So it's unreliable, but it's going to become better. Give it a bit of time. And then another thing is that when you talk to this AI, you don't talk to the large language model. You talk to a bunch of agents that they filter your request, simplify, extract the meaning, and then at the end, what reaches the large language models is a fragmented, simplified, oversimplified requests. And then what comes back also goes to a bunch of AI agents that somehow make it in a way that it covers all the aspects of your request. So it's not just an LLM. It's the whole architecture around. At the end, it has become an engineering problem more than a research problem. And the job becomes to interface your data with whatever engine model you have available. So that's what I'm saying with consuming. It's an engineering problem.
Yeah, which I find very interesting. But when I think about the majority of our audience, business analysts and traditional enterprise architects, I'm just wondering, or my impression is they're very early in that stage. Again, like I mentioned in the first part, most of those guys are used to whatever traditional lean stuff, and they were talking with SMEs and try to do their best. There might be also a healthy skepticism of the large companies behind it. I'm working with a client in the banking sector right now, and the question is, where does my data go? And I don't want to have my competition,
it's
blah, blah.
GDPR compliant.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's others. But
That's
anyway,
another thing, yeah.
I'm just thinking, I think where I see a shift, and it's slow, is you go from, I would say, human-centric, human-driven analysis to data-centric analysis. So if I want to make that shift now as a complete newbie, what would be your recommendation to get my feet wet?
There are a bunch of resources that you can use there. It depends how data literate you already are. What happens now, a lot of people, they do a basic course on machine learning, and then they also start the neural networks, and then they move on to the AI courses. I think you need you need to know a bit of the basics of machine learning, a bit, for example, the gradient descent, just to know how how it works, how the whole thing was trained. But then, as I said, then there are a lot of other courses about like machine learning engineering or AI engineering, where you just consume, you know how it works, but you don't build it yourself. You just consume it. And use it. So one thing that I was saying before, because people, they say they are a bit cautious about that. For example, one is the vibe coding. The vibe coding or the vibe, whatever. Now you can vibe everything, vibe editing, right? Vibe video editing, vibe reporting. You can vibe a lot of stuff. But let's say the vibe coding. I know that the purist coders, they don't like that because, of course, it's unclear what it does. You have to check it, then you still have to know what it's doing. I've used it. And frankly, it's a huge help. Of course, it can't do everything by itself, but it's a huge help because you don't remember how to do it. You ask him to do it and you have a bunch of things that it's already written. You would have copied and pasted from the internet anyway. So he does it. And then, of course, you need to know what he's doing and you check it and more or less. But for example, I remember I was doing some web pages and I asked to change all the colors and the whole thing and the style, and he changed it in 5 minutes. It would have taken much longer to me, right? So it's of course, it's true that you have to learn more and you have to become a bit expert in that. But it's also true that it's very, very fast.
I like Python, but when I do Python myself, I always finish up having loads of indent issues and little formatting issues, and that always frustrated me a lot. And with vibe coding, it just makes clean code, and it's fantastic. But I always have to think about the logics, and of course, I've been programming for many years, so I know the basics there. But I'm not sure if getting into that. So ultimate, what you're saying is people that said before, can't program, I don't want to program. I think a lot of people should learn to become comfortable to look at a script or work based on a script that is created by a machine and overcome this fear of code, which I think a lot of people have, because there's no reason to have that as much as it used to be there.
I didn't say that people who cannot code should use the vibe coding. I'm saying that the vibe coding is a huge help for the people who can already code. It's huge.
Okay.
Because it becomes
absolutely.
so much faster.
Maybe you guys live in a different sphere than I am, but what I see people who take their Excel sheets and then try to schmooze their Excel sheets into something that they can draw some conclusions from. Right, or take their Excel sheets or CSV files and somehow bring them together so that their process mining tool can work with that. And I don't know if it's just me, and I'm not a programmer, and I can read some stuff, but I wouldn't call myself there. But I appreciate with a tool like a KNIME, visual interface. It's a logical thing. Now I filter, now I branch, now I merge, whatever I do. And it just makes it easy to access, and it's reproducible. And the best feature that I love is the little traffic light that tells me where I fail,
where you failed, where you got stuck. But Roland, that's a good topic, because a lot of KNIME is not about machine learning. It's just about a good, nice sequence, a data pipeline for creating reports, for example. So aggregating, disaggregating, joining data, doing some calculations, and coming up with a good report. And I always had a big argument with my colleagues that would make Excel formulas over 4 rows in a cell and do all these fancy features in Excel. They said, but I can do it there. And I said, yeah, I used to do it with Visual Basic, and I would have done that. And now I do it in KNIME, and it extracts the data, and I can manipulate it, and I have each step. I can debug each step. I can change each step, and I have a fantastic result at the end. And I still have the argument today. So I'm wondering if what you're saying, Roland, how can we convince people not to work in Excel all the time. And because
Yeah.
if you take Excel and put it to AI, it writes a Python script, as Rosario said, extracts the
Yeah.
data. And I've seen some beautiful reports and tables where it took the data from wherever, let's say Excel, and then it transformed it, and then it built up new tables and reports and pie charts. And each step, it explained what it was doing and was then displaying the results. And I think, say, to a certain extent, KNIME is a real fantastic tool for creating a much more reliable data pipeline for reports than you would typically have in Excels that always break at some time. And then you take ages finding which formula needs to be updated with which cell. And that was always, to me, one of the big benefits of having such a nice layout. And here, to a certain extent with AI, I also see another trend that reporting become, let's say, demystified and de-Excelized, because it also takes it step by step, and you can go it step by step as an approach. And that's what I think people have to do. They have to, a lot of people have created the Excels, but they cannot explain how they actually got there and what they've really done. KNIME was always explaining step by step which each step you have been doing. And I think with the AI, you can also act, if you use whatever, Jupyter or Deep Note or whatever they're all called, you give in the data, you say, I want to transpose this, I want to transform it, I want to join it, I want to have a report. And it does all the code for you, but then it displays the result for you. And you can explain what you've done and you can change it. So the explaining character of these tools is fantastic, but they also force you to structure your data analytics. You have to break it down into steps and then take step by step and build it into whatever tool you want to use. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people sit down for hours until it works out, but they cannot explain it. It's not scalable. It's not deployable. It's their own tool. Sometimes, and I think they love it because it's theirs and it's only they can explain it. But that's something people have to overcome. And that's where we have to encourage them, that the tools are there and it's the means to help other people understand what they've done and help themselves understand what they're doing.
So maybe, Rosario, if I pick up that topic, obviously you were thinking a lot about that. How do you convince people to go into a KNIME?
Mm-hmm.
And I see that first step. How do you get into this? And then there's a lot happening, and then you grow into the quote unquote pro data science stuff. But my question to you is, how do you get people to do the first step, to get out of that IKEA method that Russell just described? It's mine, I build it.
Well, so I used to say that even if KNIME is easy to use, it's a low-code tool, and as you say, you put the Lego bricks together, and but you still need to know what you are doing. And this is true also with AI. You still need to know what you are doing. You still need to be able to change it, to assemble it, or if somebody assembles it for you, to interpret it. So there is still something to learn. As easy as it can be, it's just a help. At the end, you need to know what you are doing, what the steps are, and also to validate the results, because the results could be wrong. So it's your responsibility at the end to get it. And this one was, and that was exactly my job, to educate people to use the techniques properly. There was a colleague of mine who used to say, I'm like a kid with a bazooka, because I can shoot anything. And with KNIME, and then I don't know what I'm doing. So it is true a bit. Yeah, it's very powerful and it's very easy to use, but then at the end you still need to know what you are doing. And
I agree.
a bit of self-education, but this is true also for the vibe stuff. That's why I'm saying it's not, if you want to play, sure it works, but it's not something that you can use if you don't know anything. At the end, it's just a help for the people who already know how to do it. Also because development is not just coding. There is the whole version, the whole optimization. There is much more to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I had situations in projects where I need to do the data transformation, and I fired up a big KNIME workflow, and I have a 32-inch 4K monitor, and the whole thing was full of little yellow nodes in there. And at some point, I asked one of my team members, said, "Hey, can you update that model?" And he just flatly said no. And I was thinking like, oh, the senior consultant tells the VP that he doesn't want to do it. That's an interesting experience. But then I was thinking about it and said, actually, he's right. Don't mess it up. Because what I saw was, okay, I understood it. Obviously, I needed to make it better so that others understood it. But the benefit was I could explain to the client, oh, this is what you gave me. This is what I did. And this is the result that we get. And that was um, not replaceable, because then they said, oh, when we pumped it into the process mining tool and they saw the big spaghetti diagram of all their discovered processes, well, nobody asked if my data model was incorrect, because I could walk them through. I could walk them through my thinking, which I think I would have lost a lot of people if I would have done that in SQL or
for
any
sure.
other code.
It's easier to use, but it doesn't mean that you have to be absolutely, not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And that's
I
also
agree.
the thing with Excel. We had that was the Excel thing is an old one. So of course people, they were saying, but I do everything with Excel and it works. And I say, okay, so if you're happy, keep doing it with Excel. But then, sometimes there were errors. And then I show, because a classic error with Excel, now I'm going to say a classic error, and I've seen that so many times, is that they were doing, they had the months, and they had a bunch of, I don't know, money or stuff for each month. And then, for example, February is shorter. So they would do copy and paste, and then the macro that they had, every line had a macro in the last column, for example. And then in March, you had the last rows of the spreadsheet without the macro, because the previous month there was no macro. There was less, I don't know, the business grew and the classic.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you would have a total, and the total didn't include these rows because there was no macros in this row. That was a classic. And then finally they discovered that, there was a mistake, blah, 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 and so on. It was correctable, of course, but there was you couldn't see that. And then I showed them how to do the same stuff with KNIME. And then you would just re-execute, read the new data, re-execute, and this problem would not be there because all the data that was coming in would be processed, right? Yeah, so those, I'm not saying that Excel is bad. If they like Excel, they can keep using Excel. But of course, there are some limitations because then they would say, but if you use, what is the Power BI? And of course, it's a powerful tool. It's not a bad tool. But for repeating the same action, the same routine, every something, that of course might, I don't want to say it doesn't work, but it might incur input errors, and we don't realize that.
And now you're triggering my PTSD, as I said before. Not time calculations are my enemy. It's like, but anyways. So I like to go into another break, dear audience. What were your experience with everything that we said in the second half? From how do you get started with identifying that data analysis is a good thing to do? Where are you on your journey? Are you on the Excel phase? Or did you go a step further? Are you in your programming phase? Are you in your AI rules the world phase? When we come back in a few seconds, we're going to wrap up the show, and you will learn a lot about Rosario. We have very important questions for her, and we'll see you in a few.
Welcome back from the second break. And so I think they're coming to the end of the show. I think the most important question to Rosario is, how can we and the audience get in touch with you?
So now, as I said, I have I've been putting together a little community To learn more together about AI, you can find us on Substack. The name of the community is My Data Guest, so mydataguest.substack.com. And we are 2 people, but I am one of the hosts and the, content creator now, but chooser for the various episodes on the community. So you can find me there.
And we obviously will put the links in the show notes. And speaking of that, obviously Rosaria also has a LinkedIn. I guess that's a place where people can find you too. So I take the liberty to put that into the show notes as well.
I'm Rosaria Silipo. I'm the only one. Fine.
The one and
You're
only.
the only
the
one.
and
Yes.
only.
You can find me for sure. Rosaria Silipo, I'm the person.
So we're going to do that. And with that, by the way, I don't know if it's a little bit too much premature, my dear listeners. We are about to start, I guess, a Substack as well. So there's some thoughts in our little place to build a community, and Substack seems to be the hot place to be these days. We're also, and I don't know if the famous editor of this show here will be at that point in time, we're also thinking about starting a Patreon. So if you want to support the little podcast that could after 4.5 years and help paying the bills, and we have some really great ideas as benefits there. But independent of all that nonsense, do me a favor, dear audience. Get to your 5 best friends, and I hope you still have 5 best friends in real life. Tell them a little bit about our podcast, because I think Rosaria is absolutely right. The biggest thing you can have is community. You want to build community. We want to build community around the topics of process management and architecture. So the best way to do it is supporting the little podcast that could at whatsyourbaseline.com. And there you will also find the show notes with all those information that we spoke about. And with that, I've been Roland Volt.
Rosaria Silipo.
I'm Russell.
And we'll see you in the next one.